and do so by asking Mayor Pro Tem Jew Don Boney to speak very briefly about his recent trip to Africa. He went with me when I went, and just recently, just a day or so, he returned from a trip that he went, and I want him to share with us the activities, the results of that trip. Councilmember Jew Don Boney.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll begin this meeting as I did in all of the discussions that I had and presentations that I made when I was in Africa. I first thank God because my pastor told me that whenever we pray, we ought to praise God, then we ought to thank God for all the things that God has done, and He certainly has done much for us. And then we ought to ask forgiveness for things that we have not done that we should have, and things that we did that we know we should not. I want to thank Mayor Brown. He is a man of few words and doesn't always tell of all the significant and great things that he has done, but I don't mind raising my voice and telling you about the greatness of this man and the privilege it's been to serve as his Mayor Pro Tem, his deputy mayor, over the course of the past 4 years. I don't know how long your memory is, but I remember it wasn't that long ago when forums and occasions like this, when diverse members of our community were not convened by the mayor. The mayor didn't attend a lot of those events. We have greater access to City Hall under Dr. Lee P. Brown than ever did the African community before. We need to celebrate that. And a large reason that you have that opportunity today is because many of you got involved in a leadership way and in a grassroots way and got involved. And that's what made it possible to have a mayor who has that kind of commitment, integrity, and sensitivity to the entire community. Houston is a very, very diverse city, and we work best when we work together. And also the leadership of Case Sawal. I want to thank you, Case, for what you did to help facilitate in the leadership role of my opportunity to return to the motherland. He is the chair, of course, of this advisory board, and I had the privilege of nominating a tremendous candidate to the port who now serves as vice chairman of the Port of Houston. I didn't know how important the port was until I got elected to city council. It's like so many aspects of governance at the municipal, state, and federal level in various agencies and departments, until you get involved, until you are aware by that day-to-day interaction, do you understand the significance of all of these various agencies and departments and the difference they can make in your lives and the lives of your family. And let me just also thank a few other people, and I will be brief because this is not a report on my trip to Africa, but the Mayor's Advisory Board meeting in which we talk about how the city can help to further facilitate the growth of the African community. But I must raise up the name of Matash Kasahadix. Your ears ought to be burning, Matash. Because I now have had the privilege and opportunity to go to the motherland, the ancestral home of African people, on 3 occasions. And I've been to, I think, almost 11 nations, but it was my first time to go to Ethiopia. And Matash, the Ethiopian people have a wonderful world and nation and land to be proud of. It is an extraordinary trip. Kwame Achipong from Ghana. Kwame, you did it up. I got a chance to do all of the meetings that were important for me to do, and I appreciate the work you did in setting those up. I went to Ghana, Nigeria, and Ethiopia, my 3rd time in Ghana. My second time in Nigeria, but they tell me in Nigeria that if you've not been to Lagos, you haven't been to Nigeria. Well, I went to Lagos. We think we got a pretty big city here. There are 14 million Nigerians in Lagos. So it was quite a learning curve in understanding urban management and development in Lagos. And I met with the governor of Lagos State, and we had much to discuss and dialogue with each other about how we build a city and build cities better. And the Ethiopian American Trade and Investment Council facilitated my meetings. This was a business development mission in Ethiopia. Now, this was my first time in Ethiopia, and the mission exceeded all expectations. I don't know, there was divine intervention. It just went higher and higher and higher and higher, with the end of the capstone being in Ethiopia. I have said to people in describing the trip and the visit that I had with Ethiopia is that I now know the mountaintop that Martin Luther King talked about when he said, "I've been to the mountaintop," in his final speech on April 3rd in 1968. And he said, "I've seen it and I've looked over, and that we as a people will one day get to the promised land." Well, on Sunday, I was on that mountaintop. It's in Toto. It's in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. Addis Ababa is the most unusual place on the African continent. It is the only African continent that is 8,000 feet above sea level, and some of you may not know it, but snakes can't live 8,000 feet above sea level. So there are no snakes in Addis Ababa, the only African capital where there are no poisonous snakes. And so we went 8,000 feet higher to Mtoto Point, which is a point where you can survey all of Addis Ababa, some 3.5 million people. You can see the entire city there. And as I sat at the point, I saw this haze, and then I realized that we were above the clouds, looking down upon Ethiopia. And then an Ethiopian suggested that we might go to the church and just say a little prayer. And I said, that's exactly, whenever the prayer suggested, we go and do that. And so we went another 500 feet up on the mountain on a four-wheel drive vehicle. I didn't walk. And we prayed at a 500-year-old church. You have so much to be proud of in Ethiopia. I just did not know. For over 5 years, Ethiopians, since I've been elected to office, have been saying, you've got to go to Ethiopia. Well, finally I went, and I'm going back. Houston has a very special relationship with Ethiopia, largely because of the groundwork that Matash did in working for Ethiopian refugees. Back in the early 70s, when Matash asked me to write a letter on behalf of the refugees who had fled Ethiopia because of the Derg communist government that overthrew Haile Selassie, all the way up through when Congressman Leland took 8 trips to Ethiopia to respond to the people there who were suffering from the famine. And after going over to Ethiopia, I told some of my friends, you don't know Mickey like I know Mickey. Now that I know what Mickey saw, I know why Mickey went 8 years to Ethiopia. And the trip was a very emotional one, as well as a very successful one for me personally, and I think for the city of Houston. Among the models that I took to Ghana, Nigeria, and Ethiopia were some that we've developed here in Houston. One was how we could further develop business development opportunities, particularly for not just our multinational corporations, but African and African-American small business people. One of the things that we found, Esther, as we've been throughout the movement all these many years, whether we were talking about social justice, good schools, health issues, that somewhere along the way, economics and finance comes into the picture. We say that Africa is our key, that we are the key to each other, and if we can bring all of our African and African-American people together, we then have within us the capital, the expertise, the professional training to help resolve the many problems that exist and challenge all of us in our community. Secondly, there's a real opportunity for tourism. I would say bilateral tourism from Africans to Houston, because we do have a lot in Houston to be proud of, but also for Americans to Africa. In Ethiopia are the oldest bones of the human race. The oldest bones of humanity are in Africa. And when the mission came from the Cultural Ministries on January of this year, we talked about bringing an exhibition of those old bones to Houston, Texas, to our Museum of Fine Arts. The theme of the Museum of Fine Arts, which is in District D, which I represent, is a place for all people. And so I contacted Dr. Marzio. Some of the curators told me he would love to have the first right of refusal on such a project, and asked if he would be interested in helping to organize and have this exhibit here at the Museum of Fine Arts. And the word got out. I don't know how it did, but not only does he want to do it and will facilitate it in any way possible, but the Museum of Natural History wants to as well. There was a world exposition that was attended by 15 million people in Hamburg, Germany, just on last year. At the Ethiopian pavilion, 2.1 million people went through just to see the replica of Lucy. We call her Dinknesh, those bones. Well, I had the distinct honor and privilege of seeing not only the cultural center and the replica, but the actual bones, the most complete bones of the human Dinknesh, 3.5 million years old. That is the kind of thing that strikes your heart. I also toured Ethiopian Airlines. Ethiopian Airlines is the second largest, most professional airline in Africa. They have a training facility there, and one council member, who I will not name tonight, was amazed that there are a number of African and African Americans who serve as pilots in the commercial airline industry. Well, we probably need to take him through Ethiopia too, because there are over almost 200 Ethiopian airline pilots trained by Ethiopian Airlines, which not only trains Ethiopian pilots, but pilots from other countries as well. The pictures, the images that we've seen of Africa on our news programs and so forth do not tell the entire story of Africa. And the only way we're going to find out is if we take them to Africa and show them not only the tragedy but the triumph in Africa today. There's a 5-star hotel in Addis Ababa. Houston does not have a 5-star hotel. We're working on bringing one in now. And so the facilities and the infrastructure in Addis Ababa rivals some of that of other capitals in the world. I toured a maintenance facility at Ethiopian Airlines, and you could do a white glove inspection of the floor of this maintenance facility and bring up no dust. I saw the repair and maintenance facility where they took an engine from a 767 airline, put it on a crane, tested it out, put it in back and brought the engine up to full power inside a controlled-contained engine. This idea that all African people live in villages and huts is an idea that's long gone and wrong. I guess in sum, the things that I learned and saw on this, my third trip, were both heartbreaking and exhilarating. HIV and AIDS is devastating, just devastating people of African ancestry all around the world. And as I looked at the suffering of the people, it broke your heart. Just last year, Danny Glover was with a young six-year-old boy who talked about matters of life and death as if he were 35 and 40 years old. That same young 6-year-old is now unable to raise his head as he lays down in the hospital and waits for the time when full-blown AIDS takes his life. But equally, I can report to you on the other side, that the first ladies of all of the nations of Africa have met to issue demands for new protocols in Africa, that we end child labor, end child soldiers, that we expand and develop an orphan program to adopt orphans of parents who have died of HIV and AIDS. All of the African leadership I met are working 12 and 14 hours a day. They're not sitting back in some comfortable position. They're working, and they're working hard to transform the conditions of African people. And the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, founded some 38 years ago, were celebrating their anniversary while I was in Addis Ababa. And I had the opportunity to attend the reception of the OAU, to talk with the Secretary General of the OAU and the numerous ambassadors that were there, to make a suggestion and a plea that African Americans be included within the OAU. It's time for our people to be brought together. And so they all unanimously agreed that now, as they transition from the OAU to the African Union, all of us must be brought together. Now, there are still challenges with issues related to these emerging democracies. Dr. Kalu, I got your letter, and I had full and complete discussions with all parties on that matter. And at some point in the near future, we hope to convene a meeting of both the Ethiopian community and the African community, where I'll report in great detail on what happened. But I want you to know that Africa's on the move. Our time is now. The work is being done. God bless. Thank you very much. Mayor, the people of Ethiopia wanted me to deliver this gift to you on behalf of the people of Ethiopia for all that you've done for Africa and for Ethiopia, and on their behalf I wanted to present that to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.